This probably comes as no surprise to a lot of people out there that January is the top search month for jobs, and the job market is starting the year off pretty strong. Unemployment fell to 3.5%. Just to give you some perspective here, that number, we haven't seen that since early 2020. So if you're hoping for a career switch in 2023, Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin is here with some tips. I know this is a pretty common thing for people starting off in January, Dr. Lisa.
Yeah, it's a really big time for search, so it's a very common thing for people to kind of expect that this time of year.
And you say it's a good idea to really reflect before you actually start that physical job search. Can you talk about why the reflection step is actually really important?
I think you don't want to jump into anything. You really want to think about what's next for you in your career progression. You also want to think about what company do you want to work for, what values do they have, what organizational composition do they have. And then I think you also want to consider what kind of leader do you want to work for? And so these kind of inform the kind of roles that you go for, the kind of questions you ask in an interview. It's really important to have a sense of what you want and need.
So after you reflect, maybe you're like, you know what, I do like my current company, things are going well, but I haven't seen any growth. If you want that growth, where do you start with that search?
First, you start with the piece around what do you want in the company? What kind of role are you looking for? And then you follow that up usually with a conversation with your manager regarding sort of what you're looking for in the next step. And hopefully you'll get their buy-in so that they can be supportive to you in that process. All
right, Dr. Lisa, let's say you've looked at all the things, you've tallied it up, and you've decided this is not for me, and you definitely want a career change. You have to take this process very seriously because you're telling us it is technically a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it usually takes longer than people expect. And so I think it's really important to consider that and to think, there's a lot of things on social media that suggest it's super easy to make a career change, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes really a lot of thought to reconstruct your transferable skills. So I think that's a really important thing. And potentially getting some help from a career coach can be really helpful in expediting the process.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those common mistakes that people make during this process. Let's say I want to jump ship and, open a wine truck and charcuterie board place. I don't have the skills for that just yet. So if I make that process, what's the mistake I'm making by just leaving my job altogether?
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of really consider that it takes time to build those skills or to build sort of the plan for that. And I think it can be important to consider how you're going to actually transition. Maybe you'll keep the job, maybe you'll go part-time. What are you going to do to actually make the transition? And that process around timing is the biggest mistake people often make. They think it's going to happen a lot faster than it does. And when it doesn't happen in the same timing, oftentimes they will abandon those dreams or kind of crash and burn and then have to go back to things. So I think it's really important to have a plan and have a strategy.
So let's say you have the plan, things are going well. Maybe you started a part-time job during your job, you're ready to make the full transition. And now it comes time for that interview process that can have a lot of anxiety because this is something you've never done for this type of job. What do we do? How do we approach that?
So the most important piece is to prepare. So oftentimes people don't want to do this level of work because it's very kind of tedious and difficult, but to really kind of get a large number of questions that might be asked. You can get them on the internet and you can Google them, but you also can look at places like Glassdoor that have specific questions for your organization that you're applying to and actually write out the answers and practice them in front of a mirror, practice them in front of people, get used to actually saying the words, especially with behavioral interview questions where they say, give me an example of, tell me a time when. You do not want to be meandering into stories that might reveal things you don't want to reveal. So practice is so important. And the second piece, I would say, to manage the anxiety, use mindfulness, meditate regularly, and then use that meditation during this time to actually increase your ability to regulate your nervous system. So increase the amount of things that you're doing around mindfulness during this time, because it can be very anxiety-provoking and stressful.
I think you're pointing out a really good point. It is a lot of work, but if there's something that you do want to change, it ends up being worth it if you're willing to put that in and try something new rather than maybe being miserable in the job that you have now.
Yes.
All right, Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin, thank you so much for joining us here every week. You guys, in the meantime, follow her on Instagram, on LinkedIn, get some more advice. You can check out her new book as well. That's called Your Unstoppable Greatness. Thanks, Doctor.